Every American family in the 1970s had a grandmother who could feed a whole table on almost nothing and make it taste like the best meal of the week. Money was tight and prices kept climbing, but she never let it show at supper. She knew the wild greens along the fence, the cheapest cuts at the butcher, and the old country tricks her own mother taught her. Out of almost nothing came warm, filling homemade meals that we would give anything to taste one more time. If you grew up in an American kitchen in the 1970s, you already know these suppers. The ones that meant home, that meant love. These are 25 delicious homemade suppers that poor grandmothers made in the 70s that we miss. Subscribe before we begin. The countdown starts now. Hoppin John. The low country supper of black-eyed peas and rice cooked together with a little pork for luck and flavor. Black-eyed peas cost 20 cents a bag in 1973. Today, around $2. Rice, a ham hock, and onion. Total then under 50 cents. Today, under $5. Fed 6. You simmer black-eyed peas with a ham hock and onion until tender. You cook rice in the seasoned broth. The peas go soft. The rice soaks up the pork broth. The whole pot goes savory and golden. Hoppin John came from low country gullah cooking in the Carolinas. By 1973, it was a poor grandmother's supper across the South. Black-eyed peas and rice. A low country supper for pennies. Dandelion greens and bacon. The spring supper of wild dandelion greens gathered free and cooked down with bacon. Dandelion greens cost nothing in 1973. Bacon, onion, and vinegar. Total then under 20 cents. Today under $3. Fed 4. You gather young dandelion greens. You fry bacon and cook the greens in the grease with onion. You finish with vinegar. The greens go tender and slightly bitter. The bacon enriches them. The vinegar cuts through. Dandelion greens came from Appalachian and Italian immigrant foraging. By 1973, they were a poor grandmother's spring supper. Wild dandelion greens with bacon. A free spring supper. Cracklin with redeye gravy. The Southern supper of salt-cured pork fried crisp and served with a gravy made from coffee and drippings. Cracklin cost 25 cents a pound in 1973. Today, around $3. Black coffee and drippings. Total then under 40 cents. Today, under $5. Fed 4. You fry the cracklin until crisp. You pour black coffee into the drippings to make redeye gravy. You serve over grits or biscuits. The pork goes crisp and salty. The gravy goes dark and sharp. The coffee cuts the richness. Cracklin with redeye gravy came from Southern cooking. By 1973, it was a poor grandmother's breakfast supper across the South. Crisp pork and coffee gravy, a forgotten Southern supper. Fried green tomatoes and grits. The supper that turned unripe garden tomatoes into crisp cornmeal fried slices served over grits. Green tomatoes cost nothing from the garden in 1973. Cornmeal, egg, and grits. Total then under 30 cents. Today under $4. Fed 4. You slice green tomatoes and dredge them in cornmeal. You fry them until crisp. You serve them over hot buttered grits. The tomatoes go crisp outside and tart inside. The grits go creamy. The two together are savory. Fried green tomatoes came from Southern garden cooking. By 1973, they were a poor grandmother's supper across the South. Unripe tomatoes fried crisp over grits, a Southern supper. neck bones and sauerkraut. The supper that slow-cooked cheap pork neck bones with sauerkraut until the meat fell from the bone. Pork neck bones cost 19 cents a pound in 1973. Today, around $2.49. Sauerkraut, onion, and caraway. Total then under 50 cents. Today, under $5. Fed 5. You simmer neck bones with sauerkraut, onion, and caraway for hours until the meat falls off. The meat goes tender. The kraut goes sweet and soft. The broth turns rich. Neck bones and sauerkraut came from German and Southern thrift cooking. By 1973, it was a poor grandmother's supper nationwide. Sheep neck bones and kraut, slow-cooked into supper. Poke sallet with fatback. The supper of wild poke greens gathered free from the roadside and cooked with a little fatback. Poke greens cost nothing in 1973. Fatback and an egg. Total then under 10 cents. Today under $2. Fed 4. You boil the young poke leaves in 2 changes of water. You fry them in fatback grease. You scramble an egg into the greens. The greens go dark and tender. The fatback enriches them. The egg binds it together. Poke sallet came from Southern and Appalachian foraging. By 1973, it was still a poor grandmother's spring supper across the South. Wild greens gathered free, a forgotten Southern supper.
Salmon croquettes with white gravy. The Friday supper of canned salmon shaped into croquettes and topped with a creamy white gravy. A can of salmon cost 49 cents in 1973. Today, around $2.49. Cornmeal, egg, flour, and milk. Total then under $1. Today, under $5. Fed 4. You mix salmon with cornmeal and egg and fry into croquettes. You make a white gravy with flour and milk. You spoon it over. The croquettes go crisp, the gravy goes creamy. The two together are rich. Salmon croquettes came from Southern and Midwestern thrift cooking. By 1973, it was a poor grandmother's Friday supper nationwide. Salmon croquettes under white gravy, a Friday tradition. She never called it poverty. She called it supper. Fatback and white beans. The supper that simmered dried white beans with salt-cured fatback into a smoky, hearty pot. A bag of white beans cost 25 cents in 1973. Today, around $2. Fatback and onion. Total then under 40 cents. Today, under $4. Fed 8. You simmer white beans with fatback and onion for hours until creamy and smoky. The beans go soft. The fatback flavors the broth. The whole pot turns smoky and rich. Fatback and white beans came from Southern thrift cooking. By 1973, it was a poor grandmother's supper across the South. White beans and fatback, a smoky pot for pennies. Turnips and turnip greens. The two-in-one supper that cooked turnip roots and their greens together with a little pork. Turnips cost a few cents a bunch in 1973. A piece of pork and onion. Total then under 30 cents. Today, under $4. Fed 5. You simmer the greens with pork until tender. You boil the turnip roots and mash them. You serve them together. The greens go dark and tender. The turnips go soft and sweet. The pork flavors both. Turnips and turnip greens came from Southern garden cooking. By 1973, it was a poor grandmother's supper across the South. Turnip roots and greens, a whole plant-made supper.
hog head cheese and crackers. The cold supper of pressed, seasoned pork sliced onto crackers. Nothing from the animal wasted. A hog head cost 40 cents in 1973. Today, around $5. Vinegar, sage, and crackers. Total then under 50 cents. Today, under $7. Fed 10. You simmer the hog head until the meat falls off. You season it and press it into a loaf. You slice it cold onto crackers. The head cheese slices clean and cold. The vinegar sharpens it. The crackers snap underneath. Hog head cheese came from German and Southern whole animal traditions. By 1973, it was a poor grandmother's cold supper nationwide. Pressed pork on crackers. Nothing wasted. A cold supper. Cornmeal dumplings in bean broth. The supper that dropped cornmeal dumplings into the leftover broth from a pot of beans. Cornmeal cost 3 cents a cup in 1973. Bean broth and flour. Total then under 15 cents. Today, under $2. Fed 4. You bring leftover bean broth to a boil. You shape cornmeal and flour into small dumplings. You drop them in and cook until they float. The dumplings go soft and dense. The bean broth flavors them. The whole pot is filling. Cornmeal dumplings in bean broth came from Appalachian thrift cooking. By 1973, it was a poor grandmother's supper across the mountains. Cornmeal dumplings in bean broth. Supper from leftovers. Wilted lettuce with hot bacon grease. The spring supper that wilted fresh garden lettuce with a splash of hot bacon grease and vinegar. Garden lettuce cost nothing in 1973. Bacon, vinegar, and onion. Total then under 20 cents. Today, under $3. Fed 4. You tear fresh lettuce into a bowl with green onion. You fry bacon and pour the hot grease over the lettuce. You add a splash of vinegar. The lettuce wilts and softens. The bacon grease enriches it. The vinegar brightens it. Wilted lettuce came from Appalachian and Pennsylvania Dutch spring cooking. By 1973, it was a poor grandmother's spring supper. Garden lettuce wilted with hot bacon grease. A spring supper. Rutabaga and potato mash. The supper that mashed cheap rutabaga together with potatoes and butter into a filling dish. A rutabaga cost a few cents in 1973. Potatoes and butter. Total then under 30 cents. Today, under $4. Fed 5. You boil rutabaga and potatoes until soft. You mash them together with butter, salt, and pepper. The mash goes soft and golden. The rutabaga adds a sweet earthiness. The butter enriches it. Rutabaga and potato mash came from Scandinavian and Scottish immigrant cooking. By 1973, it was a poor grandmother's supper across the north. Rutabaga and potato mashed together, a filling supper. You remember her kitchen, the smell of something simmering, the feeling of being fed and safe. That was her love, cooked into every cheap and humble supper.
Salt pork and milk gravy. The supper of salt pork fried crisp and served with a creamy milk gravy over biscuits. Salt pork cost 12 cents in 1973. Today, around $1.50. Flour, milk, and biscuits. Total then under 40 cents. Today, under $5. Fed 4. You fry salt pork until crisp. You make a milk gravy from the drippings and flour. You serve over biscuits. The salt pork goes crisp. The gravy goes creamy and rich. The biscuits soak it up. Salt pork and milk gravy came from New England and Southern thrift cooking. By 1973, it was a poor grandmother's supper nationwide. Crisp salt pork and milk gravy over biscuits. A humble supper. Cracklin cornbread and pot likker. The supper of cornbread studded with pork cracklings crumbled into the dark pot likker from greens. Cracklings cost 10 cents in 1973. Today, around $2.49. Cornmeal and pot likker. Total then under 30 cents. Today, under $4. Fed 6. You bake cornbread with cracklings mixed in. You crumble it into the pot likker left from cooking greens. The cornbread goes crisp with pork bits. The pot likker is dark and rich. Together, they are deeply savory. Cracklin cornbread and pot likker came from Southern black cooking. By 1973, it was a poor grandmother's supper across the South. Cracklin cornbread and pot likker, a rich Southern supper. Souse meat sandwiches. The cold supper of tangy pressed pork sliced onto white bread with mustard. A pig's head cost 40 cents in 1973. Today, around $5. Vinegar, sage, and bread. Total then under 50 cents. Today, under $7. Fed 10. You simmer the pork until it falls apart. You season it with vinegar and press it into a loaf. You slice it cold onto bread with mustard. The souse slices cold and firm. The vinegar sharpens it. The bread holds it together. Souse meat came from German and African American whole animal traditions. By 1973, it was a poor grandmother's cold supper nationwide. Tangy pressed pork on bread, a cold summer supper. Cushaw squash supper. The supper that cooked down a giant garden cushaw squash with butter into a sweet, filling dish. A cushaw squash cost nothing from the garden in 1973. Butter, sugar, and cinnamon. Total then under 10 cents. Today, under $3. Fed 8. You peel and cube the cushaw. You cook it down slow with butter and sugar until it collapses. You finish with cinnamon. The squash goes soft and golden. The sugar caramelizes. The cinnamon warms it. Cushaw squash came from Native American and Southern garden cooking. By 1973, it was a poor grandmother's late summer supper. One giant squash cooked down, a week of sweet supper. What we miss is not just the food. It is her. The way she turned nothing into something and made us feel like the richest family at the table. Fried bologna and egg supper. The supper that fried thick bologna until the edges curled and served it with fried eggs. Bologna cost 69 cents a pound in 1973. Today, around $3.49. Eggs and bread. Total then under 50 cents. Today, under $4. Fed 4. You fry thick bologna until the edges curl and blister. You fry eggs alongside. You serve with bread. The bologna goes crisp at the edges. The eggs go soft. The bread soaks up the yolk. Fried bologna and eggs came from working-class Appalachian cooking. By 1973, it was a poor grandmother's supper nationwide. Fried bologna and eggs, a humble, filling supper. Mustard greens and cornmeal cakes. The supper of dark mustard greens cooked with pork and served with fried cornmeal cakes. Mustard greens cost a few cents in 1973. Streak a lean and cornmeal. Total then under 30 cents. Today under $4. Fed 5. You simmer mustard greens with pork until tender. You fry cornmeal cakes in a skillet. You serve them together. The greens go dark and savory. The cornmeal cakes go crisp. Together, they are filling. Mustard greens and cornmeal cakes came from Southern Black and Appalachian cooking. By 1973, it was a poor grandmother's supper across the South. Dark greens and cornmeal cakes, a Southern supper. Fried cornmeal mush with sorghum. The supper of cornmeal mush, chilled, sliced, fried crisp, and topped with sorghum molasses. Cornmeal cost 3 cents a cup in 1973. Sorghum and grease. Total then under 20 cents. Today under $5. Fed 5. You chill cooked cornmeal mush overnight. You slice and fry it in grease until crisp. You pour sorghum over the top. The mush goes crisp outside and creamy inside. The sorghum runs sweet into the cracks. Fried cornmeal mush with sorghum came from Appalachian cooking. By 1973, it was a poor grandmother's supper across the mountains. Fried mush with sorghum, sweet and crisp for pennies.
Chow chow over beans.
The supper that spooned homemade end-of-garden chow chow relish over a bowl of plain beans. Garden scraps cost nothing in 1973. Vinegar, sugar, and beans. Total then under 30 cents. Today, under $4. Fed 6. You simmer beans until creamy. You spoon homemade chow chow relish over each bowl. The beans go soft and plain. The relish goes sweet, tangy, and bright. A spoonful transforms the bowl. Chow chow came from Southern and Pennsylvania Dutch canning traditions. By 1973, it was on every poor grandmother's table. Bright chow chow over plain beans, a garden's final gift. Potatoes and butter. Total then under 30 cents. Today under $4. Fed 4. You soak the salt mackerel overnight to draw out the salt. You poach it gently. You serve it beside boiled potatoes with butter. The fish goes firm and savory. The potatoes go soft. The butter ties them together. Salt mackerel came from New England and immigrant thrift cooking. By 1973, it was a poor grandmother's Friday supper in coastal homes. Soaked salt mackerel and potatoes, a thrifty Friday supper. Fried squirrel and gravy. The rural Appalachian supper of squirrel dredged in flour, fried, and served with a milk gravy. Squirrel cost nothing when hunted in 1973. Flour, milk, and grease. Total then under 20 cents. Today under $3. Fed 4. You dredge the squirrel in seasoned flour. You fry it until golden. You make a milk gravy from the drippings. The meat goes tender. The crust goes golden. The gravy goes creamy over the top. Fried squirrel and gravy came from Appalachian mountain cooking. By 1973, it was still a poor grandmother's supper across the hills. Hunted squirrel fried with gravy, a mountain supper. Buttermilk cornbread and sweet milk. The supper of crumbled cornbread poured over with sweet milk, eaten with a spoon on the leanest nights. Cornbread cost almost nothing in 1973. A glass of sweet milk. Total then under 15 cents. Today under $2. Fed 2. You crumble day-old cornbread into a bowl or glass. You pour sweet milk over it. You eat it with a spoon. The cornbread swells and softens. The milk goes gentle and sweet. It comforts on the hardest night. Cornbread and sweet milk came from Southern and Appalachian tradition. By 1973, it was a poor grandmother's last resort supper. Cornbread and sweet milk, gentle comfort on a lean night.
Tuna salad on crackers. The supper that needed nothing but a can opener, a fork, and a sleeve of saltines. The end-of-the-day meal a tired mother could assemble before she even took off her shoes. A can of tuna cost 29 cents in 1972. Today, around $1.89. Mayonnaise, onion, salt, and saltine crackers. Total then under 50 cents. Today, under $4. Fed 4. You drain the tuna and flake it into a bowl. You mix in mayonnaise, diced onion, salt, and pepper. You spoon it onto saltine crackers. The tuna salad goes creamy and cool. The saltines snap underneath. The onion gives it a sharp bite. Tuna salad on crackers came from American thrift cooking that stretched a single can across a whole family. By 1972, it was a no-cook weeknight supper in working-class homes everywhere. No stove, no oven, 10 minutes from cupboard to table. Chicken noodle soup with crackers. The supper that came from a can and a sleeve of crackers and warmed up the whole family on a cold night when nobody had the energy to cook anything real. A can of chicken noodle soup cost 12 cents in 1971. Today, around $1.29. A can of water and saltine crackers. Total then under 20 cents. Today, under $3. Fed 2. You empty the soup into a pot with 1 can of water. You heat it until the broth steams and the noodles swell. You crumble saltines into the bowl. The broth goes golden. The noodles float soft. The crackers swell and soften in the liquid. Canned chicken noodle soup became an American staple after Campbell's launched it in 1934. By 1971, it was the universal too-tired-to-cook supper in homes coast to coast. A can and some crackers. The whole family warm in 10 minutes. Bologna and cheese roll-ups. No bread needed, just a slice of bologna, a slice of cheese, and a swipe of mustard rolled up and eaten with your hands. The after-school and too-tired supper of an entire generation. Bologna cost 69 cents a pound in 1973. Today, around $3.49. American cheese and yellow mustard. Total then under 50 cents. Today, under $4. Fed 4. You lay a slice of bologna flat. You spread it with mustard. You lay a slice of cheese on top. You roll it tight and eat it like that. The bologna is soft and salty. The cheese folds inside. The mustard sharpens every bite. Bologna and cheese roll-ups came from American working-class kitchens where lunch meat was always in the refrigerator. By 1973, they were a no-cook supper and snack in homes everywhere. No bread, no plate, no cooking, just rolled up and gone. Sardines on toast. The protein supper that came from a flat little tin and a slice of toast. Cheap, fast, and filling for a working family with no energy left at the end of a long day. A tin of sardines cost 19 cents in 1972. Today, around $2.49. White bread, butter, and lemon or mustard. Total then under 40 cents. Today, under $4. Fed 2. You toast the bread and butter it. You lay the sardines across the toast. You add a squeeze of lemon or a smear of mustard. The sardines are rich and salty. The toast crunches underneath. The lemon cuts through the oil. Sardines on toast came from European and American working-class kitchens, where tinned fish was a cheap protein. By 1972, it was a fast supper in homes that needed food without effort. 1 tin, 1 slice of toast, supper in 5 minutes. SpaghettiOs-style quick pasta. The homemade version of the canned classic. Small pasta in a quick tomato sauce that came together in 10 minutes and made the children cheer. A box of small pasta cost 15 cents in 1973. Today, around $1.49. A can of tomato soup and a little butter. Total then under 40 cents. Today, under $3. Fed 4. You boil the small pasta until tender and drain it. You stir in tomato soup and a spoon of butter. You heat through 2 minutes. The pasta goes soft. The tomato soup coats every piece. The butter makes it rich. SpaghettiOs launched in 1965 and became an instant American children's favorite. By 1973, the homemade version was a fast weeknight supper in homes everywhere. A box of pasta and a can of soup. The children's favorite in 10 minutes. Hard-boiled egg and salt plate. The simplest supper on this list. A few hard-boiled eggs, a shake of salt, and a slice of bread. Protein on the table with almost no effort at all. A dozen eggs cost 50 cents in 1972. Today, around $3.49. Salt and white bread. Total then under 60 cents. Today, under $4. Fed 3. You boil the eggs for 10 minutes. You peel them under cold water. You serve them with salt, pepper, and buttered bread. The eggs go firm and rich. The salt brings out the flavor. The bread rounds out the meal. The hard-boiled egg supper came from universal thrift cooking, where eggs were cheap protein. By 1972, it was a fast, no-fuss supper in working-class homes everywhere. Buttered noodles with Parmesan. The supper that took a box of egg noodles, a pat of butter, and a shake of Parmesan and turned them into something the children asked for again and again. A box of egg noodles cost 19 cents in 1973. Today, around $1.49. Butter and grated Parmesan. Total then under 40 cents. Today, under $3. Fed 4. You boil the noodles until tender and drain them. You toss them with butter until coated. You shower them with grated Parmesan. The noodles go glossy with butter. The Parmesan melts and clings. The whole bowl is simple and rich. Buttered noodles came from German and Eastern European immigrant cooking. By 1973, they were a fast, comfort supper in American homes everywhere. A box of noodles and a pat of butter. Comfort in 10 minutes. Toast with tomato and mayo. The summer supper of the South. A thick slice of ripe tomato on toast with a swipe of mayonnaise and a shake of salt. 3 ingredients, no cooking, pure comfort. A garden tomato cost nothing. White bread and mayonnaise. Total then under 20 cents. Today under $3. Fed 2. You toast the bread. You spread it with mayonnaise. You lay thick slices of ripe tomato on top with salt and pepper. The toast crunches. The tomato is cool and juicy. The mayonnaise ties it together. The tomato and mayo toast came from Southern summer cooking, where ripe tomatoes were abundant. By 1972, it was a fast, no-cook supper in homes across the South. Toast, tomato, mayo. Summer supper in 3 minutes.
Hot milk and bread. The oldest comfort supper there is. Torn bread in a bowl of warm, sweet milk, eaten with a spoon. The meal a tired mother made for tired children on the hardest nights. Stale bread costs nothing. Milk, butter, and sugar. Total then under 10 cents. Today, under $2. Fed 3. You warm milk with a little butter and sugar. You tear bread into a bowl. You pour the warm milk over it. The bread soaks up the warm milk and goes soft. The butter melts through. The sugar makes it gentle and sweet. Hot milk and bread came from universal poverty and sick room traditions across cultures. By the 1970s, it was still the too-tired-to-cook supper in the poorest American homes. Warm milk, torn bread, a spoon. The gentlest supper there is. These were not failures of effort. They were proof of it. On the nights she had nothing left, she still found a way to feed you.